recording. So just a quick introduction to this session. So thank you all for everyone who could join. So Zoom breakout rooms are an increasingly popular function, whether you're facilitating classes or even if you're facilitating kind of extracurricular or other, professional activities. And you want to get kind of a small group component in your Zoom meeting. It makes that small group discussion more feasible, and you can facilitate different kinds of activities that way. And there are a number of different options when facilitating breakout rooms. So we're going to talk about what those options are and figure out what might be the best fit for you. And first, Alexis is going to go over an example from her course and how she's used breakout rooms, because I think it's really helpful to get an example to see the different ways that you can organize them, because beyond just being a tool, I think it's also about kind of the pre-planning ahead of time to think about what you want participants to get out of this experience and what they will see on their end as well. So Alexis, if you wanted to go ahead and share your example, I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
Okay, so the lab group uses breakout rooms quite a bit and for a lot of different ways. Sometimes we'll use them for classes all together of 127 students. Sometimes it'll be smaller sections of those students. And it really just depends on the activity that we're looking at. So we've done things based on counseling. So taking students in teams and taking certain teams and putting them in different breakout rooms with individual counselors. We've done things where we've had teams together and we've had an evaluator rotate through. So there's a lot of different ways that we can go about setting it up. But some of the biggest things for us that we found to be successful to set the groundwork. So make sure that you kind of set your video and expectations up front. So, if you want students to have their videos on in the breakout room, ask them to have their videos on. If you want screen sharing for breakout room hopping is what we call it, ask them to have their screen sharing on. If you are using Katie's amazing pre-sorted breakout rooms, please make sure that you let them know the expectation is that their team number needs to be in there. They need to be signing in with that single sign-on through their VCU account, so they're able to be automatically sorted. And Katie has all of that great information on the Canvas site. I can share my screen real fast to kind of show you what we show them at the beginning of lab that we just have up. So that way then that expectation is set for the students. So it's nothing fancy, but just how to log in, team number, turn your cameras on if able in the breakout room. I had students comment that they really actually appreciated the if able because sometimes their bandwidth does not allow them to turn their camera on and still maintain connection to the call. So I think things like that are really helpful, and we've had a lot of great participation and not a lot of difficulties with sorting. I think last time I only had 2 students not pre-sort, and that was because they logged in after I opened up the sorting capabilities. So I feel like that's a pretty big success. So other things to think about, like I mentioned, have Katie pre-build your teams if you want, especially for large groups. Like lab, it's incredibly helpful. And then know that only the hosts can assign breakout rooms. So that's why right now I'm logged in with my phone as well. So that way then I can show you kind of Blair Witch style what this is going to look like. So I'm going to try to show you something I found out today when I was meeting with Kayla is if you are clicking on somebody's image, if you are a participant in the meeting, you can pin. The pin will only pin for your screen. So if you hit the little 3 dots in the blue box on the top right of an image and drop down, there's a pin button, and that will pin me or Katie or whoever you want to pin right now, and nobody else can tell who you're pinning. They've added a spotlight for everyone button for the host. So I can then spotlight my phone for you all. So it's not the best quality, but it's the only way that I can share my screen and be able to show you what the behind the scenes look like for breakout rooms. Because when I share my screen in Zoom, it immediately knocks out all of the Zoom content and only shows what's behind Zoom on my computer screen. So hold on one second, because it's now telling me that I need to, there we go. Okay, it was telling me that I had some audio issues. So I know this is definitely not the best, but we're gonna make it work. So when we come down here, let's see if I can do it a little bit better even. Okay, when you come down here, it's not the greatest, but you can, oh wait, Katie, am I not host anymore? Oh, can you make, I have to make, there we go. I was on the other one. So you can see that there's this little breakout room button here. This is the main control panel for breakout rooms. Only the host is going to see that. So the host is the only one that can truly have all control functionalities of a breakout room. You can make people co-hosts. And what that will do is that actually allows them to kind of breakout room hop. So once you as a host place that person that's a co-host into a room, that person can then move themselves from room 1 to room 2 to room 3, however they want, without being managed by the host, which is really nice. If you don't do that and you need somebody to move, it actually can get a little awkward, and we'll do some of that because what happens is if you move somebody as a host and they're like still talking, like you'll literally like move them like mid-sentence without them knowing that it's going to happen. So giving the co-host the capabilities to do this is really nice. So if I hit breakout rooms, I can't see what you guys are seeing now. There we go. There's like a lot of angles on this. So you can do assign automatically, which, you know, I usually just do assign manually when we're in these small groups. If you assign automatically, it will kind of like randomly sort people. If you're on a call that Katie has pre-built, it will actually show up with the pre-built people already, which is really amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and have it have 3 breakout rooms just because that's easy. And then if I want to assign somebody, I hit assign and it'll give me a drop down of everybody who is not currently assigned. So once I go ahead and I assign Abby to breakout room 1, and if I want to go down to breakout room 2, Abby is no longer an option to assign because she's already been assigned to breakout room 1. So if I go back up here to breakout room 1, I can see that Abby is still clicked as in being a participant, but then everybody else still needs to be placed. I can also move Abby. So say I accidentally put her in breakout room 1, but I really meant for her to be in breakout room 2, I can just move her to 2. So there's a lot of behind the scenes functions. This is stuff that's really hard to see without doing stuff like this. And Katie created a video that like Kristen and I recorded where we just completely screen captured with like Loom or Kaltura. I can't remember which one Krista used on that day. So it was really helpful it's really helpful to just kind of see what it looks like. So I am going to go ahead and just assign everybody like random rooms. I don't need to assign myself. And then just so that way, then when I open up breakout rooms, what's going to happen is everybody is going to be given an alert. Don't hit the alert. If you do hit the alert and you accidentally go into the breakout room, whatever, you can come back out. There's a little button at the bottom, which is what all your students are going to see, and it will allow them to come back to the main room. Or you can send those students, or you can like close all your breakout rooms and it will automatically make everybody come back. So once I hit open rooms, don't accept it. So that way then you can kind of see what happens on this end and stay in the main room. But I want you to see what happens on your side. So don't accept, don't accept. When you're in here, there's this broadcast message to all. And nobody accepted. So, oh wait, yeah, I don't, maybe not. I can't move her. Okay, good, she's back. Okay, so when you're in this room, the only way you can communicate to students is by hitting this broadcast to all, or you can actually go up here and I can assign myself to a room and go to a room to see a student or team. So this broadcast message to all is like your communication, like it's the way you talk to them, but it's only like a 10 to 15 second kind of like screen pop at the top. So it doesn't stay forever. It doesn't like fireworks and signals to let them know that you've sent something that says they have 5 minutes left or anything like that. So there are definitely some limitations to it, but it is kind of what we have to work with right now. So my recommendation is to set your timing goals kind of up front for a lot of these things. So that way then teams do know, still use it, but it definitely doesn't, it's not the perfect platform to communicate. As a host and a co-host, this is where that breakout room hopping functionality comes into play, because what Krista and I have done with some of our like team activities is one of us stays in the main room to resort anybody that gets kicked off. And then the other people actually go through and check in on each of the teams, just like you would normally in class if we were in real like life, like in person, I guess we're in real life, but if we were in person. So it's kind of convenient because it gives us that ability to check in independently with the teams, lets them know that we're there, that we're still able to answer questions that they have, but it also, it just basically gives you that other platform to communicate. Let's see, there we go. And then when you close rooms by doing this, and then basically it will close everything in 60 seconds. Sometimes depending on the way that the breakout rooms were set up behind the scenes, you have the option to select like 15 seconds, close in 30 seconds, 60 seconds. Do you have a comment, Katie?
If you click your settings wheel,
Yeah.
bottom left-hand corner, there are a couple of settings there that you can alter if you want it to be different from the default. So for example, there's auto close breakout rooms after X number of minutes. That will give participants a little timer in their top right-hand corner. Again, this is something you have to manually set before you send people out into their rooms. But if you say, okay, it's going to be 15 minutes, then they'll see in there the little timer in the corner to let them know. And then you can use that, send a message to all as a supplement to say, okay, 3 minutes left in case someone's maybe not paying attention, or just to encourage people to wrap up their conversations.
Yeah. And depending on like how I have mine, I can actually drop down mine. So, cause I don't have this button set. So it's great. It gives me just the option to like close it, to like select it when I close mine. But so depending on how you select these buttons or don't select these buttons, it will give you more options over here, or you may have to go back in order to enable some. But thank you, Katie. That wasn't one I was going to talk about, but I do agree. That's a new function that I didn't really know existed until recently. So I don't know how old it is. If it was something new they added or something that's been there all along that I just wasn't aware of. Okay, so off with that. So go ahead and close these. Okay, and then I will show you all some of the things that we do to help us prepare. So I'm going to stop screen sharing for this second, or stop spotlighting myself. So one thing that we've done is when you're doing these activities that tend to be a little more in depth with multiple evaluators or multiple teams, is try to think about how you can optimize your breakout rooms and do as few switches as possible. So for example, when we do immunization station lab, there's 6 students in each team on average. And what we do is for some of them, we combine teams just because we didn't have enough residents and faculty members in order to have, 11 evaluators in each section. But what we did is we took breakout room number 12 that was already built. I tried to use the breakout rooms that were already built in there. Anything that's pre-built by Katie, something that I thought was really cool this year that I was really fearful of. And I reached out to Katie in like a panic, like, am I gonna screw something up if I like delete breakout rooms during one lab session that I'm not using during that session? Because we commonly split up the lab into 2 different sections. And if you delete anything during one lab session or one classroom, when you close out of that Zoom link and open it back up, it will go back to your preset sections. So that also kind of goes on the reverse. If you think, oh, I can go in there and I can like add some breakout rooms that I need for my class tomorrow, you should reach out to Katie for that. Because if you do it today, and if it's something that Katie has controlled, what happens is when you close out of that Zoom session, it will revert back to the original teams that Katie had put in there. So you have to make sure that you're saving settings if you want any changes that you make to stay for a subsequent course. And Katie is our expert on that. And honestly, I think for most of the class settings, Katie is the only one that has access probably to make those settings firm. Is that right, Katie?
Yeah, for any changes to pre-assigned teams, all of our classroom links are managed through accounts that only FARTech can manage. So myself or Danny will be the person that can help you change the breakouts if you need to.
So I just needed temporary changes for this immunization station lab. So from 8 to 10, I deleted all of the team, all the breakout rooms, except for 12, 13, 15, 17, 19, and 21. And that was just so it made my screen a lot more manageable for me to look at. And I didn't have to have 21 teams that I was trying to sort through. I made sure that all of the students were reassigned to the correct teams. And I didn't want Katie to do this permanently because it was just for one lab session. So it wasn't a good use of time for her to like change anything. And it took about maybe 5 minutes of prep time in advance. And then I changed the evaluators. So I kept the students in the same room the entire time. And during rotation 1, influenza was in breakout room 2, anaphylaxis in breakout room 13, Tdap in 15. And then for rotation 2, I changed the evaluators. So that way then I was only moving 6 to 8 people each rotation. So that took about maybe 30 seconds to change all of the rooms, which honestly is a quicker rotation than you would see in person. The limitation is kind of what I alluded to before, is that if you are moving somebody and they're in a breakout room currently, so when I took like C. Sadler and A. John and I moved them from rotation 1 to 2, if they were in the middle of speaking at that moment, they just got moved, like pulled out of breakout room 12 and moved to 13 when I moved them. I would send an alert, like in saying, I'm going to move you all in about 15 to 30 seconds. But, if they didn't see that or something, like they would just get pulled automatically. Nobody complained about it, but people did think it was kind of funny sometimes. But otherwise, we got good feedback that students felt like they were in the Smith building, like around 225 tables while doing this session. And then another one that we did, I'll just show you kind of another way that we went about doing our table, was individual counseling while we also had teams. So granted, this is like a large scale. So this was all of the students. Well, it was about 63 and 64 students per session. So they would each be in their individual team rooms. And then I created new rooms for them to go and do their counseling. Each counseling evaluator was assigned one of these new rooms. So whenever I needed the students to go and do their individual counseling, we just pulled them out and moved them into the individual rooms. So it's not a super hard process, but it is something that you have to just stay organized when you have 60 to 120 something students in breakout rooms and you're moving them all around, and just try to plan ahead to see what the best way that you can to minimize the number of switches that you need to do. I think that's it, unless there's anything else that Katie wanted me to talk about.
I think what you just touched on at the end there, I had a lot of questions, especially when we were initially doing this, about what's the best way? Should we have seven simultaneous Zoom links going on from 7 different accounts, or can we use Zoom breakout rooms to do this? And in most cases, Zoom breakout rooms was the best option, just because you're able to maneuver between rooms because you're all in the same Zoom call. Whereas if you have, different groups and different Zoom links, as you can imagine, you're having to close this call, jump into that call. So it can actually, although it feels maybe like it can be kind of complicated if you don't have the setup in mind for how exactly I'm going to go about maybe like counseling, it's actually more convenient or more seamless to have everyone in that same Zoom room than it is to have them all in disparate links and it's always more challenging to manage multiple links where everybody has different Zoom account settings, and you can't necessarily control exactly how someone else has their Zoom account set up. So it's easier to have that all going through one link in general.
And I was one of those people that asked for that because I didn't know as much about breakout rooms last July. So it honestly is so much easier if you have anything like this, because it basically puts the control of the flow of your session in your hands, and you have the ability to manage time. Whereas if people are using external Zoom links, you could anticipate an allot for 10 minutes, but they could be gone for 20 to 25 minutes, and you can't just leave one Zoom call and go to another to check on them. And it would be a lot to manage. Having everybody in one, I can clearly see when we were in that, when I showed you all that breakout room screen, I can clearly see what room everybody is in. So I could see like, oh, okay, like, Katie is still with Rachel counseling. So that session is going a few minutes late. Okay, let me just send them a message and tell them that, their session should be wrapping up. It just allows you to be able to like manage your time better and be more efficient in the process when it's all in one. You just have to be more organized up front. But I think it makes it more seamless when you're in your session. So.
Did anybody have any questions about using breakout rooms or from anything that Alexis just showed that we can answer now?
I have a question, and I apologize, Alexis, that I missed your entire presentation, so you may have answered this already. Do you have a preference for forcing people into breakout rooms versus having them have to push the join button?
From us, because it's usually one of us behind the scenes controlling the breakout room and one of us kind of controlling the session, I prefer for them to have to press the button. And the reason is because Krista can tell you that there were multiple times that she accidentally released breakout rooms a minute early, or I accidentally opened them a minute early. So when one of us was still talking, so it was really nice that they had to press a button to get in there and they didn't just leave the call. So, because there's so many little buttons to press in here. So I kind of like it better that way. And then, I just call students out when they're sitting there and they're waiting. I'd rather be the one calling them out and say like, hey, like, JT, are you going to head to your breakout room and be a participant with your team or no? Let's get going. Because otherwise their team members are going to have to do that. So at least it gives me an impression about maybe who is not being as valuable of a team member or engaged in class as well. So that happens in therapy a little bit too. Sometimes I've noticed this past couple of weeks.
Well, I've had the experience as a participant of just being forced into the room. And there've been times when I wanted to ask the speaker something before, and you're just whisked away and it's like, oh, okay, now I'm in the room. Okay. Like it can be very, I don't know, just seem a little disjointed. So I just wonder.
In my experience, the host does have to click open breakout rooms and then participants are prompted to join. To my knowledge, you shouldn't just be whisked away because a lot of times when there are participants sitting in that main room, it's because they haven't clicked the join breakout room because maybe they stepped away, they went to the bathroom or they went to get some water. So oftentimes it does require some action on a participant's behalf to join a breakout room.
For what we were doing, I didn't do anything. It just put me in a room. Next
There
thing I knew,
are two
I was,
settings.
yeah,
There's both options.
yeah. And it was the same way with returning to the main room, where it wouldn't even be a countdown. It was just like, your room is closed. See ya.
And that's all options that you can set, is how long until breakout rooms close, whether it's immediate or whether it's 15, 20. I mean, you could do like 27 seconds if you wanted to, or like you could, I think you can like pick anything pretty much. So.
And Andrew, is that at the account level where you choose if you want participants to automatically be pushed to the breakout rooms?
That's always a good question with Zoom. I don't remember if I just saw it when we were looking at Alexis's screen, but there are several different subsettings. I think it's at the account level.
Yeah, so I'll double check on that and see if that's something that you set in meeting, but on the account side, by default, we've set it so participants do have to click this meeting, but that's always something that we can change if you think it would be better a different way. So that's a good question.
So Katie, it is on here. So it's one of the little like wrench button ones. It's automatically move all assigned participants into breakout rooms. So, and then there's, yeah, so it will automatically whisk them away.
So you do have the choice to automatically whisk them away on your manual behalf once you've jumped into that meeting.
Yeah.
If that's a real problem time-wise, but it sounds like in general, it's maybe not so much of a problem.
It definitely moves things along fast. You don't have to wait for people to click buttons. They're just gone.
Did anybody else have any questions about Alexis's example or maybe ways that you guys are thinking about using breakouts?
Did you guys talk about the students' preference for being kind of randomized into groups sometimes so that they're not always with the same people?
We did not.
I know that's something that came up with our focus groups, is especially in this virtual environment, they feel like they're seeing their teammates all the time, but they don't really get a lot of interaction with their, if it's graded team activity, if it's just like a thing, share or something.
That may have been my internet connectivity, but you cut out a little bit at the end for me.
I think it might be mine too. I'll turn my video off. But yeah, just to let them kind of see others. So I guess something to think about, depending on what kind of group activity you're having, maybe mix it up and not necessarily keep them with the same group every time.
And I think that's a good segue to something that I wanted to touch on, but Alexis, if you wanted to add something in response first.
No, I was hoping, are you going to talk about like students moving themselves into their own groups, like the...
So there are different options. So the option that we tend to use the most, as Alexis described, is the pre-assigned breakout rooms, because that seems to be most convenient because we have consistent teams throughout the semester that you don't want to have to remake every single time if you want to do a group activity. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and show you some of the other options. So like Alexis just touched on and Laura just mentioned as well, You can use Zoom breakouts not just for pre-assigned kind of group activities, but you can also use them to maybe do a quick think, pair, share type exercise, or a quick group discussion using automatic groups. Another question that I've had in the past, I think I've talked about this with Rachel before, is depending on your activity or your circumstance, it might actually be easiest to use the automatic groups. So like when Alexis was sharing her screen with us earlier, you can see that Zoom says, okay, how many rooms would you like to create? And if you think, okay, I have a class of 100 people and I want them all to be in groups of, 3 or 4, then you put in the number of rooms that would approximately make that number come out, and Zoom will automatically break everyone up into groups of 3 or 4 for you, and then you can open all rooms. So there isn't any of that sorting that you might do with the pre-assigned rooms or with manual rooms, for example. So you don't necessarily have to sort people one by one in order to have a Zoom breakout room kind of experience for people. Or if you really want them to have the experience of talking to someone that they haven't talked to before, or talking to someone outside of their group. I know that's something that we've done in my graduate courses when we're talking about, can we have someone just quickly to discuss about a prompt that we had for today's reading, or kind of quickly discuss like your thoughts about, the video that we just viewed or something like that, where it's not necessary to determine who the participants are. You just need 3 participants talking to each other in a room. So that's a really quick way to get everybody into a group discussion if you're not concerned about who exactly is in a particular group. You can also use manual breakout groups, and I think that this is probably most relevant or most appropriate when you have smaller groups that you're working with. So for example, our P3 elective courses, or if maybe you have like a departmental meeting with 15 people or so, you can create manual groups. So say you want people who are interested in topic 1 to be in this room and topic 2 in this room, or if you're in a departmental meeting and you want, 3 different topics to be discussed, or people are on certain subcommittees, you can manually divide them up that way. If it does matter who is in a particular group and you have a small number of people that you're sorting, because you do have to one by one say, okay, so Alexis was manually assigning all of us earlier in this call, which again, doesn't take too much time, but it's really, you really want to decide between, do I want to randomly split these people up just to have a conversation about a topic, or does it matter who's in each room? And do I want to manually make sure that everybody goes to the right place? There's also a new breakout room option called self-assigned breakout groups. So this does require, so I just wanted to note this because it's important and could be potentially confusing. So Zoom releases updates very frequently, which has been a little bit of a challenge for Danny and Nick as we support everyone and make sure everybody's on the right version of Zoom so they can use it appropriately. That's even more challenging on machines that we don't manage. So for example, student machines, everybody has a personal computer or an iPad that they might use, or a Chromebook potentially, and different versions of Zoom will allow you to do different things. So self-assigned breakout groups require that you're on version 5.3.0 of Zoom, which most of you are probably on, but you need to check for updates to make sure. And it also requires that any participants in your room are also running this. So there is a little bit of risk in using this method, that not everyone on the call has the right version of the application to be able to self-assign themselves to breakout rooms. But when you can use it, I think it's a very interesting and helpful feature, because it kind of takes that onus off of the host and allows participants to self-select their breakout groups. So maybe you say, okay, breakout group 1 is going to talk about this topic. If you're interested, you can jump in there, or you can break out into 2 or 3. Maybe you have 3 discussion questions. So you can simplify that without having to manually assign participants on the host's end. You can also kind of create a self-assigned atmosphere by assigning co-hosts like Alexis mentioned. If you only want maybe 3 or 4 participants to be able to self-assign, then co-hosts have the ability to move themselves between rooms. And I also just wanted to quickly mention, I see there's a chat and I'll check that in a second, that there is a video here that Alexis and Krista helped me put together to show you. So kind of like we did the screen share earlier in this meeting. This is about a 6-minute video with a couple of interactive questions that will walk you through facilitating those pre-assigned Zoom breakout rooms. So usually this would be most appropriate for anyone who's using a classroom link and is coordinating next semester, for example. So it'll walk you through the steps, how to do that, and give you that experience of being in the breakout room, because it's hard to really see it otherwise. So just so you know that that's a resource, it's also in the Canvas site. And there's some additional information about breakout rooms here if you have some specific questions that you want to have answered. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing now and check the chat. Thanks, Alexis. Okay. So Laura asked, so I'm going to use breakouts for our virtual awards and recognition event and have a scavenger hunt. I as host will stay in the main room, but can assign 2 co-hosts to float between the 3 rooms. Correct. Yes, that's correct. I want co-hosts to keep people on track and be aware of the time limit. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because then you'll have those co-facilitators in the room to kind of monitor what's going on. And sometimes it can also be helpful if those co-facilitators have some kind of back channel, like maybe a group chat. I've seen that used in other courses. So faculty coordinators, if they're 3 or 4 or more that are helping to facilitate lab groups, it can be helpful to have a common channel of communication, because the main room and these little tiny breakout rooms don't have that direct chat. You as the host only have that announcement feature. And you can use, Google Chat might be a good option if they all have VCU emails. Did anybody else have any questions before we kind of get into showing you guys what it might look like to be in the rooms?
So if everybody wants, I made everybody a co-host. So I'm going to open up breakout rooms. And once you're assigned to one breakout room and you're in there, you can hit the little breakout room button on the bottom. And as long as you're a co-host, you can hop between all of the rooms. So it's kind of cool to see that function. So when you're in class and you have multiple rooms going on, you can check on this. One note is that if you are the host, I'm always fearful of breakout room hopping when I'm the host, because when you're the host, you get this button that says like close session for all. So when you go to the bottom right to like move back to the main room, you also get the like close meeting for everybody button that nobody else gets except for the host. So it's always a little bit anxiety inducing, like make sure that I don't hit the one that's going to close 127 students out of lab, because I could see that happening really, really easily. So, but I'm going to open the rooms and everybody can hop. And then if anybody wants to be the host, I don't know if anybody wants to be the host, you can practice doing some breakout rooms if you want to stay here, and we can turn it over. So just FYI, if anybody else is the host and everything gets closed out, that's why. It's because it's a learning space. So the students are getting pretty good about logging in the correct way, I think.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Would the students that are already assigned to rooms be able to hear you when you're talking in the main room to somebody? No.
No,
Okay, good.
you should be, if you're recording it, it's recording the main room and not the breakout rooms. So you need to be careful with if you're saying something that you don't want them to hear later on the recording.
Great.
We had a
Thank
question
you.
in our room, and I think it's because we're all co-hosts, but we wanted to request help from the main person to see how that looked. And I think we couldn't because we were co-hosts, right?
Yep.
How do I reassign host back to you, Alexis?
You
click
just-
on it.
Oh, so and this is helpful for you too, because if you have like guest lectures or something like that, all you do is you hover over my name in the participants box, or Katie's name or anybody's name. And then when you do that, there's going to be a little drop down and it'll say like make co-host, make host, all kinds of options. There you go. Okay, awesome. You did it.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Does anybody else have any questions, or Katie, do you have anything else to add?
Did you talk about letting the students pick their own rooms?
So I think Katie kind of mentioned it a little bit. I
I
don't
know
think
Evan said he had good success with that. He felt like it was faster than having to manually sort the ones that didn't auto go into their rooms. But I don't know if anybody else has tried it.
I don't know. I feel like always, no matter which way you sort them, it's going to be those students who are maybe not as active on Zoom that are going to be the stragglers. Whether you're sorting them manually, pre-sorting them, or the students are selecting. I feel like that's always like the last thing that I'm still doing every single class. But like, I mean, I feel like it's been almost 100% of students that are sorting automatically right now. Kayla, do you think the same thing for P1s? I don't know anybody else that teaches P1s.
Yeah, I mean, when we've done it, we've assigned them rooms. So we haven't done it where they can self-select. So I don't really know how that process works.
So I've done self-select, not for class, but we did a rotation fair here at UVA where we had about 10 rooms with 10 different preceptors, and then the 20 different future P4s could pop in and out. And it's like what we just did as co-hosts to them, where they just see a list of rooms, they can see who's in each room, and they just pick a room. That's really the only difference. It's less about technologically if it's a good idea or if it fits your event.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Andrew just said. I think it's really about what you want what the layout of the session is and maybe what the tone of the session is, because if you need people to switch into lab groups every 15 minutes on pretty much on the dot, it's going to be very challenging to have students self-select. Perhaps impossible. It might create more problems for you that way. But if it is maybe something more informal, or something where they're selecting like okay, go in this room if you're interested in this, then it might be more helpful. In the case, if the issue is maybe that students aren't getting to those rooms quickly enough or they're having to be prompted, there is that option that we talked about earlier where you can say automatically push students if you're noticing there are a good number that are not pushing automatically to the rooms. But I think in general, I would say the majority right now of people that I know of are using the pre-assigned rooms and going that method, just because at this point students are aware that they should be logging in a particular way. So we have a higher success rate than we did at the beginning with having students be automatically sorted. All right, did anybody else have any questions or anything that they wanted to try before we kind of wrapped up for today? Cool, sounds good. I'm glad 3 to 4 p.m. I didn't know if this would be a good time for everyone, but this has been fun for me, and I hope, this has been helpful for everyone. And big thank you to Alexis and Krista and Rachel and Abby and everyone who has really helped inform this process, because as you guys can see, breakout groups are not just a technological tool. They really require a lot of thought to make them work well. So it requires a lot of brainstorming to figure out what's really the best approach for my particular session. So if you guys have any other questions like that, or questions about how you want to do a particular activity next semester, feel free to reach out to me. I know there are other great faculty resources for this as well that have done things like Alexis mentioned with lab groups, and I'm sure we can all connect and talk about those things. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Krista.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.